Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We will give just a moment to have everyone join into the meeting this afternoon, and we'll get started shortly. Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome again. Thank you for joining us today for the California Jobs First Business Ready Sites Program webinar. Environmental Compliance and CEQA Certification. My name is Jolia Jackson. I'm the Regional Engagement and Development Manager with GO-Biz, um, the Regional Economic Development Initiatives Team, also known as the Ready Team. And this is the fourth session in our How to Get a Site Ready webinar series designed to help communities, developers, and local governments prepare sites for business investment by understanding key infrastructure requirements. So today's session, we are focusing on the hot topic of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. Natalie is going to be presenting that for us. She is the Deputy Director of the State Clearinghouse with the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. So we're excited to dive into this topic and provide you with some practical tools and insights to hopefully help move your projects forward. So on today's agenda, I will give a little bit information about our Business Ready Sites program for those who haven't had an opportunity to join us for this series. I'll provide some reminders and then we will go into our CEQA portion of the webinar. Natalie will answer any questions that you may have and then we'll share some support and resources. Okay, next slide. So the Business Ready Sites program, which was launched in just August of last year, is a key initiative of the California Jobs First strategy. This is led by both our Ready and CalBiz teams, and it is a tool that has been designed to proactively identify and elevate business-ready parcels across California's 13 economic regions. So this gives our teams the ability to respond quickly to business leads, specifically our CalBiz team, and to present a curated, high quality portfolio to site selectors, investors, and companies looking to grow and scale in California. Next slide, please. So the eligible entities that are allowed to submit sites would be local governments such as cities, counties, joint power authorities, and utility or community service districts with jurisdiction over the proposed parcels, along with our EDO partners, both local and regional, including business improvement districts that are focused on promoting growth and investment. Next slide. So we are focused on sites that are prime candidates for headquarters, research and development facilities, and advanced manufacturing projects that specifically drive industry development and job creation. We want to ensure that they are aligned with California Jobs First pilot sectors that include ag tech and farm equipment, semiconductor, microelectronics, and science and space and defense and satellites. So we're looking for them to be fully zoned and entitled, infrastructure ready, and zoning and environmental compliance and permits have been completed as well. Next slide. So looking at what should be included, um, organizations that are submitting business ready sites should also include any of the following information if applicable. So we want to ensure that the completed environmental review information is available, information on local zoning and ordinances. Uh, we would like to see that um, there is existing utility access, which include like water, electricity, gas, telecommunications, etc. Also, we would like to see the ability of the parcel to accommodate any advanced infrastructure. Um, and then if there are any site disclosures, um, that asking sale or lease price is not mandatory, but if available and if willing to provide that information, we'd love to have that as well. So if available, please add as much information as possible that really assist in the process of highlighting the site. Okay, next slide. Okay, so for those who have not had an opportunity to join our program and request an account, you can request an account by either scanning our QR code there. It will take you to our admin screen where you will be able to enter in your information. And once that is complete, um, the Business Ready Sites program team will receive your account request. And as long as you are an eligible entity, we will go ahead and approve that access. You can also access or request an account through our regional data tool. And once you access the regional data tool, up in the top right hand corner, there it says sign in and add properties. And there you are also able to request an account uh, through those hyperlinks. Okay, next slide. All right, so we're excited to have Natalie join us today, Deputy Director of the State Clearinghouse. She is going to share with you all things CEQA and answer your questions. So thank you so much for joining us, Natalie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know we only have a little short period of time here, so I probably won't be able to cover all things CEQA, and I knew that going into today's presentation. So what I really wanted to cover is where to find information about CEQA that we have on our website at the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. My program, the State Clearinghouse, covers everything related to our role in the CEQA process, which includes creating the first draft of the guidelines implementing CEQA before they go to the Natural Resources Agency, where they're turned into regulations. We also draft CEQA technical advisories and answer questions that the public have about CEQA. We can't give legal advice, and that applies if you send us an email, and it'll apply to the questions I answer today. So just wanted to state that up front. We can provide technical assistance. We can show you, where in the guidelines certain requirements are, point you to, technical advisories that we've written, but can't comment on specific projects and how you personally should comply with CEQA. But I did want to share our resources so you can access them later. We do a training on CEQA. It takes about 3 hours. So we won't go through the entire CEQA process, but we'll show you how to access it. And let me see if can I email everyone? Or I'm sorry, put it in the chat. I think just hosts and panelists. So let me share my screen so you can see this, and then maybe we'll be able to um, provide the link later. Or okay. Lowe's. I think if I'm able to, oh, thank you, share. Great. So the website I wanted to direct everyone's attention to is called Getting Started with CEQA, which you should now see on your screen. And you can see up at the top that address is just lci.ca.gov, CEQA, getting started. And this is where we put all of our helpful resources for people that might be new to the CEQA process or have questions. So it's kind of that initial landing page that you might want to access. Provides an overview of the CEQA process, links to other external information that's helpful, including this amazing portal that was put together by the Association of Environmental Professionals. And that includes a lot of deep dives on various CEQA topics and issues that come up with the CEQA process. We also have a helpful 101 document that goes over a high level the CEQA process. And then for true CEQA nerds like me, if you want to do a deeper dive, we actually did a webinar series called CEQA 202. And that broke apart different parts of the CEQA process and allows users to do an hour-long deep dive into topics like what is a project, an exemption, standards of review. And so that is a really great resource if you want to learn more about those specific topics. And then there's links to the actual CEQA guidelines, which are the regulations that implement CEQA. And unlike other regulations, they are fairly comprehensive. It's almost like a guidebook walking you through the CEQA process. So everything that's in statute gets repeated in the guidelines along with additional clarifying information. It's much more organized than the CEQA statute. So if you're looking for something generally best to start with the CEQA guidelines. That being said, we have not updated the guidelines since 2018 and are in the process of doing that guidelines update now. I think many folks are aware that there were pretty big pieces of legislation this last summer as part of the governor's trailer bills, AB 130 and SB 131. So we're in the process now of implementing the provisions in those big trailer bills. There were a few tasks that were directed for us to do, and then also thinking about the CEQA guidelines more holistically and what changes need to be made since that last big update in 2018. Also want to point out this is the link here to our technical advisory. So I mentioned we also create these technical advisories where we do deep dives on different topics like how to implement SB 743, which changed the metric for how to analyze transportation impacts under CEQA from automobile delay to vehicle miles traveled. That is something we get a lot of questions about. There is a lengthy technical advisory on that topic. We also have technical advisories on different exemptions, including all of the exemptions that are located outside of CEQA. Oftentimes, the legislature will create new CEQA exemptions, but won't actually put them in the CEQA statutes. They can be kind of hard to find. There's a technical advisory that will walk you through where all of those are and whether they might apply to your project. And then also the state clearinghouse itself. That is where you can find all of the information about CEQA documents and notices that have been submitted. So since 2019, we've operated an online public-facing database called CEQAnet, and that is where the public can go and search for to see if what projects are being proposed and look at their environmental documents. I know a lot of questions that we get, and I saw this. Thank you for those who filled out the survey about what you might want to hear today, are asking, is anyone using this new CEQA exemption for advanced manufacturing, for example? And CEQAnet is really the place to go where you can search for that code section where the exemption is located. So that public resources code section is the best way to find it. If you type that in, you can see the notices of exemption for any project that's actually used the advanced manufacturing exemption, for example, or the new infill housing exemption that was created this summer. That's another question we get. So if your question is how many projects have used this, that's something you can quickly look up on your own at CEQAnet. Another thing that we do that is used to be pretty rare, but it's coming up a lot these days. So if you are in a situation where there's multiple lead agencies or multiple potential lead agencies for a CEQA process, so maybe it's a project that needs permits from multiple entities, and there's some disagreement about who should act as the lead agency under CEQA and actually undertake the environmental review. We are the entity that helps resolve those lead agency disputes. So you can contact us, and then we can either choose a lead agency if there's multiple that think they might, or we have also had situations where there's multiple agencies and none think that they're the lead agency, and we have to designate one in those situations. So just wanted to flag that as a resource that has been coming up more often. So if you find yourself in a situation where you need to comply with CEQA, but there isn't a clear lead agency or an agency dispute, you can reach out to us and we can help resolve that. You can see our email address here, stateclearinghouse@lci.ca.gov. So you can send any questions there. We also operate just a general CEQA email address if you have general CEQA questions. But I did want to make time today to answer specific questions that you have. So I will stop sharing and see what questions you have for me. Thank you so much for putting that link in the chat.
Well, we hope we have some questions this afternoon. And thank you so much, Natalie, for sharing all of those great resources that are available regarding CEQA. So if there are any questions from any of our attendees here.
Yeah. And maybe while folks are thinking about the questions, just being specific to the Business Ready program and what you all are looking for. So, what does it mean to be finished with the CEQA process? That really just means that no further CEQA analysis is needed. So we were talking about, is the project shovel ready, or is it, an already constructed office space where you can just come in and turn the lights on? There's no more discretionary approvals. And that's important because it is a discretionary action that triggers CEQA. So if there is a public agency that has discretionary approval, whether it's through a permitting process or something like that, and it has the potential to impact the environment, that is when CEQA is triggered. And just because CEQA is triggered doesn't mean you're going to do a full environmental analysis. That just means that you're on the CEQA train, and you can get off really early if there is an exemption that covers your project. Heard earlier talking about that new exemption for advanced manufacturing projects that's getting a lot of interest. Or if you aren't exempt, then maybe you are looking at previously prepared environmental documents to see if you can rely on those to cover that discretionary action. And if not, then you get into the actual preparation of an environmental document, maybe that shorter negative declaration or the longer environmental impact report. But I think it was helpful to clarify, just because CEQA is triggered doesn't mean you're always doing a lengthy environmental document. And for the purposes of this Business Ready program, really making sure that a business could come in without any further discretionary actions, so CEQA is not triggered.
Great, thanks for that, Natalie. Looks like there are some questions that are coming into the chat. I can either read those off, or if you want to go ahead and bring them up.
I have it pulled up here. Um, so there's a question about whether the resources in the AEP portal are available for free. I believe most of them are, unless they've made any changes lately. It's a place where you can go, and there are their own technical advisories that have been prepared on different topics. Like how to tell if a project is exempt, and then it'll include relevant case law at the bottom of each one. Um, the next question is, how should community-based and nonprofit organizations engage with CEQA early, especially when projects are workforce, youth, or community serving rather than traditional infrastructure? Um, this is an interesting question, Elizabeth, because, CEQA is implemented by public agencies. So you'd have to know what is the public agency that might get involved, and would it trigger CEQA? So if it's, a more of a workforce development project where you're not actually having a potential impact on the environment, it's possible that CEQA wouldn't be triggered, because that is a requirement. So it's not just that the public agency is taking an action, but that action has the potential to impact the environment. And so that's why, obviously, for a traditional infrastructure project, it's much more likely that CEQA is going to be triggered if you're actually doing a large construction project. But if that isn't the case, it's possible that you'll never have to do a CEQA process. If it's more about engagement from the perspective of, a CEQA process is taking place, and as a community-based nonprofit organization, you want to follow that CEQA process, the best thing to do is to contact the public agency that's running the CEQA process and make sure you're on their email list. So they'll almost always have an email list that they're going to use to distribute information throughout the CEQA process. And so, as early as possible, get on that list and make sure that you're getting notified every step of the way. Another question, what are the key recent changes to CEQA as it relates to projects in the jobs first pilot sectors? So I think the main one that we already highlighted is the creation in SB 131 of a new exemption for advanced manufacturing projects. There were a few other exemptions that were included in SB 131, so it might make sense to look through them, things like community daycare centers, but I don't think that is what you're asking about in terms of the jobs first pilot sectors. I think the most likely connection that you're thinking of is that advanced manufacturing exemption. Right now, the requirements are pretty light. It's looking at the zoning of the site and making sure that the zoning is industrial. And so that's all the guidance we have so far. As I mentioned, and as you can see in the chat, if you go to CEQAnet at lci.ca.gov, you can actually type in the public resources code associated with that exemption and see what kinds of projects are already using that exemption. Hannah asked if the recording will be made available to folks, and I don't know the answer to that question, Julia. Yes? Okay.
Yes, we will be sharing the webinar with all of the registrants, along with some other resources that we'll share out. So, yeah.
And Hannah, always happy to give you a presentation on CEQA if you want one. Um, there is a lot to cover, but most folks, I just say it's a procedural statute. So if you follow the CEQA flowchart, you'll get the best sense of the CEQA process. And then, of course, all of the details fall in the nuances of each one of those steps. Right. And thanks for the thanks, Brian and Elizabeth. I see that.
Any other questions? Well, I don't think any other questions coming through. Oh, wait, no people also. Okay, we got a few more questions there, Natalie.
Will there be another Zoom meeting about this? There certainly could. Happy to come back if there's specific interest in the topic or if there's something you want to do a deeper dive on. Um, and then Elizabeth asked, what are the most common CEQA pitfalls we see from first-time applicants or small organizations that we should proactively or that the applicant should proactively avoid. Um, and so, I think it definitely depends on the situation. Always a good idea to do your research about site selection before you purchase a site. I think that is the easiest way to avoid any issues later on. Obviously, if you're picking a site that has a higher potential for environmental issues because it contains an endangered species or a wetland or something like that, you're kind of guaranteed to have a more lengthy and complicated permitting process. I should mention another resource that you'll find on our website is a tool called SiteCheck. And it was developed mainly for housing projects, but it can be useful for all project types because we've put in relevant data layers that apply for CEQA exemptions, but also could give you an indication of sites where maybe the path would be more difficult. And thank you, GO-Biz, for putting all these links in. You're amazing. So if you click on that site check link, you can have access to data layers and really get a sense of where environmental hazards might exist. Obviously, there's a lot of site-specific due diligence that's still needed. So it's not meant to be your entire environmental analysis, but it can give you a sense of, where projects might be more streamlined and eligible for exemptions, and where there might be environmental hazards that exist that might make that CEQA process more difficult. Generally, if you're building on an infill site, there's a lot of exemptions that already apply. And that is going to be an easier pathway. I see in the chat, Jelly's asking about leasing. So there's also CEQA exemptions for existing facilities. So if you're going into an existing facility with a lease and the use that you're coming in with is not that different than what's typically run out of that existing space, that's something that's likely going to be covered by that. It's called a Class 1 existing facilities exemption. So really thinking of it from the perspective of, is there a potential for environmental harm here? Not a lot of potential for environmental harm for a business that's moving into an existing space and leasing that space versus when you think about a large construction project, obviously there's more to consider there. And that really is the key to CEQA, is ensuring that we understand environmental impacts before they occur and then mitigating them to the extent feasible. So if there is that potential to harm the environment, we really want to make sure we understand what all the potential impacts are, and then making sure that each of those impacts is reduced to a less than significant level to the extent feasible. Okay. So Brian's asking, what criteria must a project meet to utilize the new expedited review for infill development? That is a new exemption that was created in AB 130. And I actually do know the Public Resources Code section for that. So I'm getting a lot of questions. So 21080.66, you can find all of the statutory criteria listed. It is focused on infill housing projects, so I didn't bring it up here originally. It might not be as relevant for the Business Ready program, but what is unique about it is that it can be used for projects that are up to 20 acres in size. So that is a much larger area than we've seen in past housing exemptions, and the criteria is pretty straightforward and easy to use. So since that exemption was created this summer, we've already seen over 20 projects who've utilized it, and that is pretty amazing uptake for a new exemption. For projects that are not housing projects, there are other exemptions that might apply. So there is the Class 32 infill exemption, and that covers infill more broadly. It's not just limited to housing projects. There's another exemption that's located in SB 743. And that allows for employment center projects near transit to qualify for an exemption. And then there's another exemption, SB 226, and that covers not just housing projects, but also office and commercial projects as well. And so there are other options out there that exist for non-housing projects, but that new exemption that everyone's talking about from the summer, that is focused on housing. Um, Elizabeth is asking, as organizations work through CEQA, funding is often the biggest challenge. Could you share where funding for CEQA aligned projects most commonly comes from and which agencies or programs we should be tracking? So I think the question is mainly about grant programs. Well, I guess stepping back, where funding for CEQA aligned projects comes from. Um, Typically, in a situation where CEQA is triggered on a project, it is the public agency that makes sure that there is compliance with CEQA and conducts any necessary environmental review. But typically, there is a cost sharing agreement, so it's the applicant that's covering the costs of actually conducting that review, unless it's a situation like a general plan that's initiated by the public agency itself. The agency is not actually paying for those CEQA costs. It would come from the applicant. And so I think that's what I would say in terms of where it typically comes from. It's coming from either the applicant, if there is an applicant, or if there isn't, and it's a public agency initiated project, like a new planning document, it's coming from the agency itself. And I definitely agree that funding is a big challenge, and that's something that we hear about a lot. Doing a lengthy environmental document is quite expensive and can add a significant cost to a project. I'm not aware of any funding programs that are specific to covering just the CEQA costs. Obviously there are grant programs that can cover the project, and there is new funding coming out of the state from the Climate Bond, Proposition 4, in terms of, I think, this CEQA aligned projects or environmentally friendly projects. But typically for grant programs, my understanding, and I don't know all grant programs, is that they usually want to have the CEQA review done before they give the grant funding because similar to the Business Ready Sites program, they want to make sure that the project is shovel ready, and so isn't going to have a lengthy process after they hand the funding, but could actually begin construction relatively quickly. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Elizabeth. Yes, Pamela. Now I can answer that question. The presentation is recorded and will be shared later. But really, hope folks check out the resources that we put in the chat so you can see everything that LCI has been preparing to help people go through the CEQA process as efficiently as possible, and also want to flag the ability to reach out to us if you have questions that aren't requests for legal advice. We're always happy to point you in the right direction in terms of where to find additional resources or how to get clarity if there's any confusion about the CEQA process.
Well, wonderful. Thank you. That was such a great Q&A session. So I hope that everyone was able to really gain some insight into CEQA through that portion of our webinar this afternoon. Just want to share some support and resources that we have available. And again, we will be sharing this webinar with you all following the webinar. And then also some of the things that we provide are one-on-one technical assistance. We have our regional data tool that is available at no cost. We have our Business Ready Sites program guide, along with the account registration guide and a checklist that you can utilize as you're submitting your sites to us that will help you go through the process, along with our FAQ, office hours, and our webinar series and recording. So if you've missed any of our webinar series, we do have the recordings available, and all of the links and information will be shared with you following the webinar. So thank you so much for all of you joining us this afternoon. If you have any additional questions and would like to contact us, you can reach out to the Business Ready Sites team at Business Ready Sites at gobiz.ca.gov. You can contact our CalBiz teams at calbiz at gobiz.ca.gov. And also, if you have any general questions of the GO-Biz team, you can scan our QR code there and send us your questions. I see, let's see, is there a checklist? Is there a site checklist for industrial development? So we have our checklist that is available that uh, that highlights all of our requirements for the Business Ready Sites program, and that will be provided to everyone. Okay, if there are no other questions at this time, we thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate your time this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. So thank you, Natalie, and thank you to all who have joined us. We appreciate it. Thanks and take care.